Yashodana Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna and welcome to today's lecture in Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you very much for inviting me and allowing me to speak a little bit about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, which is always purifying for the hearer and the speaker. So we are reading chapter 28, which is entitled Puranjana Becomes a Woman in Next Life. And the verse today is the verse 21. Katam darakadinam darakirva parayanaha Vartishyante maigate Vinanava ivo dadam Katam darakadinam Darakirva parayanaha Vartishyante maigate Vinanavai vodadam Katam darakadinam Darakir vaparayanaha Vartishyante maigate Vinanavai vodadam. Please, if someone can also recite. No? Katam darakadina Darakirva parayanaha Vartishyante maigate Vinanavai vodadam Katam darakadina Darakirva parayanaha Vartishyante maigate Vinanavai vodadam. Word by word translation. Katam, how. Nu, indeed. Darakaha, sons. Dinaha, poor. Darakihi, daughters. Va, or. Aparayanaha, having no one else to depend on. Vartishyante, will live. Mai, when I. Gate, gone from this world. Vina, broken. Navaha, boat. Iva, like. Udadao, in the ocean. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace is Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. King Puranjana continued worrying. After I pass from this world, how will my sons and daughters, who are now fully dependent on me, live and continue their lives? Their position will be similar to that of passengers aboard a ship wrecked in the midst of the ocean. Purport. At the time of death, every living entity worries about what will happen to his wife and children. Similarly, a politician also worries about what will happen to his country or his political party. Unless one is fully Krishna conscious, he has to accept the body in the next life according to his particular state of consciousness. Since Puranjana is thinking of how his wife and children Since Puranjana is thinking of his wife and children and is overly engrossed in thoughts of his wife, he will accept the body of a woman. Similarly, a politician or so-called nationalist who is inordinately attached to the land of his birth will certainly be reborn in the same land after ending his political career. One's next life will also be affected by the acts one performs during this life. Sometimes politicians act most simply for their own sense gratification. It is not unusual for a politician to kill the opposing party. Even though a politician may be allowed to take birth in his so-called homeland, he still has to undergo suffering due to the simple activities in his previous life. This science of transmigration is completely unknown to modern scientists. So-called scientists do not like to bother with these things because if they would at all consider this subtle subject matter and the problems of life, they would see that their future is very dark. Thus, they try to avoid considering the future and continue committing all kinds of simple activities in the name of social, political, and national necessity. So to read the verse one more time, King Puranjana continued worrying, "After I pass from this world, how will my sons and daughters, who are now fully dependent on me, live and continue their lives? Their position will be similar to that of passengers aboard a ship wrecked in the midst of the ocean." Om Gyanati Virandasya Gyananjana Chalakaya Chakshunmilitanina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hey Krishna Karma Sindhu Dinabhadru Visha Kantara Kanta Namustute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Ram Rama Hare Hare. So we are continuing on this actually very long topic of story of King Puranjana. I think for months now it's been going on, and it will continue to go on, because what will be described is like his state of consciousness is currently being described, what he's doing, what he's thinking of while he's actually about to die. And he's thinking about his family, his wife. In this particular verse, he's thinking about his sons and daughters, like how they will be protected when he's gone. And because of this state of consciousness, he will accept the body of a woman, as it is indicated even in the title of the chapter. And then his life in a woman's body will also be described, and it's a very nice story. I like it because even though it's also a metaphorical story, because yes, it talks about a life of a person in a woman's body who was married to a pure devotee, and how she actually got elevated by this kind of association. But also it talks about the relationship between a disciple and a spiritual master, because it is a metaphor that actually a woman is a disciple and she accepted a husband, actually a disciple accepted a spiritual master. So in that sense it will be explained. So there will be some nice points that we will discuss. But for now, we are going to stay in the story of Puranjana and talk about his consciousness. So I was listening to the lectures that the devotees gave in this week. So I remember that Yamuna Kiali Mataji, she was trying to give a positive side of this whole story, like even though there is this way of thinking, but the devotees, they can think in a different way and therefore attain Krishna at the end of their lives. So she was talking about the story of Govardhan and how he wanted to steal the jewels from Krishna and how he was decorating Krishna. And this story actually was meant for devotees to encourage them to do the pujari service or do the deity worship service, because that's how we can establish a personal relationship with the Lord. And then Krishna Premarupa Prabhu, he was speaking about how even though sometimes we might not be attached to Krishna, because it's very difficult to become attached to him, because in a sense when we come to Krishna consciousness, we don't know him. So we got to get to know him. But the first person to whom we get attached is the spiritual master. So these were really, really, really nice points that were discussed. I would like to talk about the state of consciousness, like something that's maybe in the Bhagavad Gita, actually, like the ABC of spiritual life. Because this whole story, you will see at the end of the story of King Puranjan when he is in a woman's body, and when her husband dies, then she's prepared to also perform sati ceremony, so to go in flames with him. But then I don't remember, was it a disguise of a Brahmana or someone else, I forgot. But then a super soul actually appears in front of her and then starts to speak to her like, well, you know, you're actually the same as I am, and I'm your very old friend whom you have forgotten. And then he tries to enliven her in Krishna consciousness and explain to her that actually she's a spirit soul. So this same thing is what Krishna does to Arjuna. So that's why through reading this verse, what came to my mind is to go to the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Because all of us, actually this whole Krishna consciousness movement is here to prepare us for dying, actually. And one of the questions that Parikshit Maharaj asks Shukadeva Goswami is, what is the duty of a man who's about to die? Because anyway, he's the one who is dying. He is the one who is cursed that he will die in 7 days, and therefore he wants to know how he can elevate himself. So in a similar sense, Bhagavad Gita also talks about elevation of person's consciousness. So we know that even though Arjuna is a pure devotee of Krishna, he was put into illusion of lamentation, because he was supposed to now fight in this Kurukshetra war. And in front of him was his family members, his spiritual master, everyone he held dear. So he was totally like, agitated and depressed, and he didn't want to fight. And he had this, what we call the bodily conception of life. He was lamenting for something that was not worth lamenting, and that's what Krishna starts to say to him. So this whole story of Puranjana is similar to that, because it was spoken to King I always forget the name, to that king. So that, because he's so engrossed in sense gratification, but through karma kanda ceremonies. So Narada Muni, he wants to elevate him, also by telling him this story of a person who is engrossed in bodily consciousness. So in the same sense, Arjuna was put into illusion, and he was also being on the platform of bodily consciousness. And therefore, in second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality said that while speaking learned words, because he was giving him so many arguments like why he should not fight, you're mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So this is like the beginning, how it all starts. And it all starts with the conception at the beginning, of course, for all of us, very theoretical and intellectual conception that we are not this body. So we can intellectually understand that. And even though it's theoretical, even Srila Prabhupada in the Purports, where he describes the soul and consciousness and all of that, he says that the consciousness can be intellectually, and the soul can be intellectually actually perceived at the beginning. So we can, in a way, understand that actually we are not this body, and that this body is a vehicle. So basically, these are the ABCs of spiritual life. And even though sometimes, devotees say, well, it's an ABC of spiritualized life, how much do we actually live this concept that we are not this body? How much we actually understand it? Because it's very difficult actually to have a consciousness that we are this spirit soul. As long as there is fear in us, fear of pain, fear of losing something that we are attached to, we are in a way in a bodily concept of life. And what can we do about it? We can be in this process of Krishna consciousness and try to purify this attachment. And that's why Krishna Prabhu, when he was talking about the attachment to the devotees, so this is the way we purify our material attachment, by becoming attached to pure devotees. So even in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, and whenever I have to speak in front of people, I never remember the verse, but usually I do know it, that attachment to material things is the greatest entanglement for the spirit soul, but when that same attachment is applied to a liberated person or a pure devotee, it opens the door to liberation. So this is because this person is a devotee of Krishna. By being attached to him, we will automatically become attached to Krishna. And this is something I was thinking about, because if you noticed, and I hope you did, because we had so many guests this summer here in Zurich, and especially, for example, we had Govinda Dasi, who wrote a book about her life and experience with Srila Prabhupada. Then we had Shruta-Kirti Prabhu, who also wrote books about Srila Prabhupada, and I mean, he's known for Prabhupada Katha, so wherever he goes, he speaks about Prabhupada. So this is Smaranam, remembering, and this is also remembering of Krishna, because Srila Prabhupada is so connected to Krishna. Everything he did for Krishna, and everything he did, he also did for his spiritual master. So when we meditate on Srila Prabhupada, we actually meditate on the whole parampara, because Srila Prabhupada brings the whole parampara, and he brings Krishna. He opened 108 temples while he was present physically here on this earth. So basically this smaranam, this remembrance, helps us in our attachment to Krishna, and it helps us at the end of our lives. And we will come to that. So the first thing, like why we change bodies, is because we have a bodily conception of life, and we think that we are this body. But Krishna said that we are actually eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. And there was never a time when he didn't exist and when we didn't exist. And what he also says is that we are individuals. And in this sense, this whole story of Puranjan also teaches us that, except that we are not this body, these concepts of, like when you read the story, then some people might think like, oh, I should be really detached from women, because if I think of women, I will become a woman in the next life. And it can be said in a different way, that a woman can be attached to a man and then become a man, which is good in the sense of having more facilities maybe for better elevation in spirituality, and there are reasons for it, and I'm not going to go into them. But Krishna says in Srimad Bhagavatam, in Canto 4, chapter 28, verse 61, that sometimes we think ourselves as men, sometimes as a chaste woman, sometimes as a neutral eunuch. This is all because of the body, which is created by illusory energy. This illusory energy is my potency, and actually both of us, you and I, are spiritual identities. Now just try to understand this. I'm trying to explain our factual position. So this is what Srila Prabhupada actually came to give us the understanding of our factual position. So it doesn't matter which body we have. We can analyze it and go through it, but in the end it doesn't matter. What matters is that we have this process of Krishna consciousness, and we can chant the Maha Mantra, and it doesn't matter in which body we are, we can elevate ourselves. And Srila Prabhupada gave everyone an equal opportunity to perform devotional service. So in that sense, there is never a difference, and all of that is seen from his own life. So we also have an example of Maharaj Bharat, who was attached to a deer. So in his next life, he got a body of a deer. So the whole point of the story is that whatever you are attached to, you will achieve it. And it's very nice, actually. I mean, because, yeah, I prepared it structurally, but just things come to my mind, that it's very similar in spiritual life. Like Krishna says, just let's see. Krishna says, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So Krishna gives a hint, So if you think of me, if you become my devotee, eventually you will come to me. But as in material life, there is a specific thing that we think about, and therefore we become this specific thing. Like in these examples, if we think of a wife, we get a woman's body. If we think of a husband, we get a man's body. If we think of our beautiful dog that we like and we die in that moment, we will get a dog's body. So that's the way it is. In spiritual life, it's very similar. So it's very similar in the sense that, and it is described in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. So in the spiritual world, there are spiritual planets, Vaikuntha Lokas, and in each Vaikuntha Loka, there is the presiding deity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It can be Matsya, Kuruma, Narayan, Narasimhadev, and so on. So these are all different forms of Krishna. And there is, of course, Krishna in his form as a cowherd boy who plays the flute and who enchants everyone. So there are different bodily features of the Lord of which we can think. And in Brihad Bhagavatamrita it is explained that whatever we think of whatever form of Krishna we think of, we actually acquire this type of spiritual body. So it's quite interesting how everything is actually just a reflection of what exists in the spiritual world. So this is just a perverted reflection. We just get tangled in the circle of samsara, but when we apply the thinking in the purifying way and our meditation on a certain form of Krishna, then we actually attain that kind of spiritual body. And that's why it is described, for example, that the associates of Krishna, they sometimes have in the spiritual world, they sometimes have a body of demigods, because there are forms of demigods there. They're performing a certain pastime in the spiritual world for Krishna. They are pure devotees, but they have a form of demigods. And therefore, also Krishna is there in some form of a demigod. Also, because Krishna is in a form of Matsya, which is a fish, therefore the devotees who are on a planet in Vaikuntha Loka, they have a body of a fish. So that's how I read it in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. So it's quite interesting how this state of consciousness works. Yeah. And also, sometimes it is, I'm wondering, like, what is the way in which we can think of Krishna? And what Srila Prabhupada, because devotees are afraid sometimes, and I will also read one story, maybe fragments of it, because I don't know if I'll have time, because it's quite inspiring. And it talks about, like, because it is said that we have to be careful of what we think of at the moment of death. That's the whole point, actually, of the Krishna conscious philosophy. Of course, there's more in details, like when we really become spiritualized, that there are more refined things that we actually think about. And also, a pure devotee, he even doesn't care, like, what will happen to him when he or she leaves the body, because the whole point that what the pure devotee wants is to serve Krishna. So it doesn't matter. That's what Prabhupada said. It doesn't matter whether I stay here on this earth, or I go to hellish planets, or I go to the, heavenly planets, or I go to the spiritual world, as long as I can serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's also a mood which Lord Chaitanya describes when he says that you can do with me whatever you want, actually. You can hug me in your embrace or leave me broken-hearted. You can do whatever you want. So in that sense, like, the pure devotee gives himself to Krishna as an instrument, and therefore Krishna can do with him whatever he wants. Of course, Krishna is very kind. He always protects his devotee, and he always elevates him, and he never puts him in situations of suffering. And even if a devotee, for example, goes to hellish planets to propagate Krishna consciousness, he's totally in this spiritual consciousness and just there for the elevation of the souls that are suffering. So it's quite interesting how it all works. Sometimes we read certain things and we think it's black and white, but there are so many, like, layers to what it actually means. And also, I wanted to speak a little bit because of this story that I wanted to read, and I don't know how I will compose all of it in 25 minutes, but I will try. So what we are actually focusing on is what we think of at the end of our life. So we said that if we think of material things and material attachment, we just continue in the circle of birth and death in samsara, and that's the example of the story of Puranjan, who will become a woman because he thought of his wife. And also we spoke about devotees who can also think of different forms of Krishna and therefore elevate themselves in the spiritual world and get these forms. And also I wanted to say that's why it is described, for instance, in Srimad Bhagavatam, how in Vaikuntha Lokas, Lord Narayan, he's like in a bluish complexion, he wears a crown, he has 4 hands and I don't know what jewels, so he's very beautifully described. And if you read about it, then you can see, especially I think it was the vision of Lord Brahma, when he saw all the spiritual planets. You can see that all the associates of Lord Narayan are in the same bodily features they have as the Lord. The only difference is this Shivas mark on his chest, I think, and Kastuba jewel. So that's the only way how you can actually see who is the Lord and who is not. So it's quite interesting. And also, like in Vrindavan, his associate, he's a cowherd boy, and his associates are cowherd boys. And usually, the gopis, they have the form of a gopi, a lady-like form, because they also meditated on Srimati Radharani. So she was as pure devotees, she was the object of their meditation. And a perfect example of that is Raghunadas Goswami, who was always meditating on Srimati Radharani, and whatever literally written work that we read from him is always prayers for the service of Srimati Radharani, praising the friendship of Srimati Radharani, and so on. And he even says, like, if I don't have your mercy, what is my life? What is to me my life? What is to me this land of Vraja? And what is to me this Krishna? So he doesn't care about Krishna if he doesn't get Radharani. So these kind of pure devotees, pure soul, they get the body of a gopi. But we are here in this process of Krishna consciousness, and we are sometimes wondering, like, what we will achieve. And Srila Prabhupada and Krishna, they pacified us in the sense when Arjuna asked the question to Krishna, he said, like, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and does not attain perfection in mysticism? And then Krishna gives him answers, and he divides these transcendentalists in 2 types of yogis. One is a yogi who had very little progress in spiritual life, but who fell, and he will go to the heavenly planets, and after he, I'm looking for the word, his good karma gets, how can you say it? He spends his good karma on heavenly planets. He has to come back to this earth, and therefore he will be born in the family of righteous people or aristocratic family. So because righteous people are also people who are in good standing in a society with good moral principles, so in that sense maybe the person in such a family can get access to spirituality. And also it is very good karma to be born in aristocratic family, to be rich actually, because then it's very easy to practice Krishna consciousness, because you don't have to think about maintaining your body. But then there is like a trap here, because if you're born in such a family and you come from heavenly planets also where you enjoy it very much, then this tendency of enjoyment doesn't go away, and then you are born in these families, and what are you going to do there? You're going to just enjoy. So therefore it is very risky to go on that path, because it means that you might just get lost again in the circle of samsara. So that's one type of a yogi. The other type is the one who was practicing yoga, bhakti yoga, for a very long time. And I don't know why, but it's kind of funny that Prabhupada puts himself into that category, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and then he said, like, yes, we were like we were practitioners in that sense, and therefore we were born in a family of brahmanas or very elevated people who were practicing Krishna consciousness. I mean, for me, they're pure devotees who came from, that's why I said it in this way, they came from the spiritual world. But they're humble, so in that sense they say that maybe that's why we got born in this family. I mean, maybe that's definitely true, but I see them like that, so it's kind of funny. But there is one example of it, of the person who we can give as an example, and that's Maharaj Bharata. But for me, when I was thinking about him, it was quite interesting because he was in the end born in a Brahmana family, and he took his birth as Jada Bharata, and he was known as a great transcendentalist. But before that, he was born as a deer. So you have to be careful. That's why I'm saying, like, it doesn't work black and white. It has all these layers, and sometimes we're trying to, because we want to control everything, we want to try to understand like how this karma works, so that if we do this, then this will happen. But it never happened like that. It's very inconceivable, because Krishna is inconceivable. And so we have an example of Maharaj Bharat, who was at the level of Bala, which is very high level. And still he got many blessings. And my speculation about it is that even though he got a body of a deer, he still retained the consciousness that he had. And it's my opinion that Krishna did, what Krishna does to his devotees. He does all this, he puts us in all these situations so that we can be more eager to come to him, so that we can even more think about him. So when he put him in a body of a deer, what did he do? He was just thinking about Krishna all the time, and that's how he left his body. And in the end, he got a man body, and he was born in a Brahmana family, and he was known as a great transcendentalist. And then he got elevated even more after that life. But why am I saying this is because we have all these examples, and they are beautiful examples, and there are also like examples which give us hope, but also that can make us depressed because we never know where we are. But where did I hear that? Maybe I heard it while you were speaking, Krishna Premarupa Prabhu, or maybe Yamuna Keli, or maybe Damodar Prasad, I don't know. But anyway, someone, or maybe someone else, but someone said that that actually we are not supposed to worry about whether we will go to the spiritual world or not, because it is the duty of the Guru to elevate us. Because if we follow purely and strictly the principles he set and the instructions that he gave, then it's his duty to bring us back to Krishna. And I don't know why I always like to read about near-death experiences when people die because I want to know what's going on. So I always read books that talk about devotees and that their experiences like when they're near death and so on. Because I guess I want to get prepared. So what I found interesting is, for example, Shutakriti's wife, the one who passed away, and of whom he wrote a book. It's called Relevance, and he was even speaking about it, I think, to you, or maybe I listened to some other class, that she was about to leave her body, and I don't know what her consciousness was, but when he was there, she would Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai, Shishi Gauranitai Ki Jai. So basically she was losing her consciousness and then like falling in some kind of a sleep, and then waking up smiling, and then he was asking her like, why are you smiling? And then she was describing the cowherd boys, and she mentioned Radharani and so on. So basically, we don't know. We just see these external things that we see, but what is actually internally happening to this devotee and what this devotee actually did throughout his life, only Guru and Krishna know. So in that sense, we should never judge people, actually. But we don't know what she did that she pleased Krishna and Guru. And also, I think his name was Surabhi Prabhu, who was an architect, right? He designed the temples in Vrindavan. And I think he was, as a young man, he was traveling through India, and then he just met Srila Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada, of course, heard that he was an architect, and then he immediately engaged him, like, well, can you please help us? Can you do these sketches of, I don't know what, can you maybe explore this architecture that we can put it, that we can use it for our temples. So he started to do service for Srila Prabhupada, and in the end Srila Prabhupada initiated him. And as I understood from his story, after Srila Prabhupada left, he just went back to his life. As he, I don't know what he did, but basically he was not so much with the devotees, he was not so much practicing and so on. And then at the end of his life, when he got sick, when he got cancer, he somehow ended up in Vrindavan. And that's where he left his body. I think the last month or last 3 months of his life he spent there. And he was in association of devotees, he was chanting, he was having darshans of the deities, and so many blessings. I mean, to leave our body in Vrindavan is very auspicious. And so the whole point of this, what I'm saying, is that Srila Prabhupada and our spiritual masters, they gave us the Maha Mantra. So if we chant the Maha Mantra purely, that is like the means that guarantee us that at the end of life, because of this chanting, we will remember Krishna. Maybe not in the way that we think we should remember, like fully consciously, now I'm dying, I'm remembering Krishna, but in some way. And one other example of it is Mother Isha, I think. She was also, she was Prabhupada's disciple, and she was one of the devotees who was living in Boston area, in America. And she was always preaching to people about chanting Hare Krishna and so on, and she was very enthusiastic about it. She didn't live in the temple, she lived at her home, but coming to the temple very often. And one time, people just noticed that she stopped coming and no one knew why and so on. And then Niranjan Swami, he somehow heard that she got a stroke and that she was living now in old people's home. And so the devotees, they wanted to visit her. And they went to visit her there. And because of the stroke, she couldn't remember anything about her life, who she is, whatever, nothing. But she remembered the Maha Mantra. And she was chanting all the time. And so when the devotees came there, they asked, like, is there this, I think she was even called Mother Isha, like, formally by everyone. And then they went to this old people's home and they asked if she's living there. Oh yes, like Mother Isha, she always, like, she's the lady who always chants, or she's the lady who speaks about Krishna, something like that. So, and when the devotees came there, and Niranjan Swami was also there, and they visited her, I mean, she didn't say anything to them because I think she was even learning how to speak again and how to eat again by herself and so on. But the only thing she said to them is the Hare Krishna mantra, that's what she said, and she remembered Srila Prabhupada. So it's quite interesting how it all works. And also what I do know is, for example, and what is hopeful, and also this is something that Guru Seva will write in her book about her husband passing away. But I mean, she tells it to people, so I guess she won't mind if I say it, that even, I think a day before he left his body, or 3 days before he left his body, it was a very short period. So when he was really suffering from his sickness, he said that he was never so happy in his life as in that moment. So these examples, they tell us that this process definitely works. And there was this, I read a little bit, this booklet, you know this devotee, I think he's a brother of, he's a Swiss devotee who went to China. Yeah, you also have an example of him. So there are many examples of what kind, how people looked like very, very sick, and sometimes in circumstances which, you wonder, like, how can you think of Krishna at that time? But Krishna gave them strength, and Srila Prabhupada said that at the moment of death, if you don't think about Krishna, Krishna will personally enter your mind and he will help you to remember him. So that's the promise of Krishna. And that's all if we chant. And that's why I had this verse where Srila Prabhupada stresses, like, what does it mean to follow the instructions of the spiritual master? Actually, it means to chant Hare Krishna. And I was listening to my spiritual master, who also said that the relationship between the disciple and the spiritual master is based on chanting. We always think, all of these things that we have actually in our movement, we have so that we become inspired to chant. So that's why when Yamuna Keri Mataji was reading that commentary of Prabhupada and Jiva Goswami from Sandarbha, where he was saying that actually deity worship is not so much important. In that sense, it was not so much important, because the most important thing is the chanting of the holy name. And just that I see if I have this here. No, it's not here. But it's very nicely said. Oh, okay. Yeah, so Srila Prabhupada says in the purport of verse 8.6 from the Bhagavad Gita. So, if in one's present life one lives in the mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the end of one's life. That will help one be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendentally absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, not material. Therefore, the chanting of the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare is the best practice for successfully changing one's state of being at the end of one's life. And there are more purposes where Srila Prabhupada stresses that. So that's our job, to chant. Doesn't matter how, even if we are like a little bit spaced out, we don't want to chant. It doesn't matter. Of course, there's the moods we should cultivate, but if we don't have them at that moment, it doesn't matter, just chant. That's the whole point. And why I was telling is because there is an example that I found it on the internet, so I hope it's true. It's very inspiring. So it's from Ananda Vrindavani Mataji, who is a senior devotee, and she's an educator and member of the Sankirtan Harinam group in Mayapur, and she's a disciple of Shivaram Maharaj. So it's quite big, but let's see. The point of it, I will skip some parts. So what happened to her, it was a near-death experience, and it happened in January 2020, where she was living in Mayapur, and she was perfectly healthy. And then just somehow, she says, because of the lack of some vitamins in her body, I found myself in a state where all systems in my body were shutting down. My heart couldn't pump blood, the digestive system stopped, toxins entered my body, and my lungs struggled to breathe. I was grasping for breath, I was in pain, and I was unable to think as the toxins affected my brain. I was in complete panic, realizing that this must be the end. And then she was also practicing, and she says, at that point, I was practicing Krishna consciousness for 23 years. Many times I preached to my students about the importance of remembering Krishna at the time of death. We discussed how to die properly, and I was confident that when my time came, I would simply focus my mind on Krishna. However, it turned out to be not as easy as we thought. So that's what we think. Like, we got it, but we don't. And then, unfortunately, throughout my life, I hadn't put an effort to chant the holy name attentively. Often I chanted while multitasking, feeling too busy with preaching and various services, assuming that someday, miraculously, due to my service, I will develop a taste for the holy name. But it didn't happen that way. So she was neglecting japa. So after 23 years of spiritual practice, at the moment of death, I panicked. And my mind was filled with thoughts of my mother, not Krishna. I recalled how she provided comfort to me during my childhood illness. And in those moments when I regained consciousness, I simply called out for my mother, completely forgetting about the Lord. Somewhere deep in my consciousness, I knew I needed to call someone else, but due to the overwhelming pain, I couldn't remember who to call or what to say. At that moment, the doctors informed me that I was on the verge of death and could pass away at any moment. The news was relayed to the devotees in Kazakhstan, where a Sunday program was taking place. Fearing for my life, the compassionate devotees started a 3-hour kirtan, praying to Krishna to help me. Through their prayers, Krishna showed mercy upon me. The holy name is not confined by material space, and their kirtan in Kazakhstan reached me in the hospital in Rangat in this way. And then, once again, I regained consciousness and let out a cry or a moan due to the intense pain. At that moment, an Indian nurse leaned over me and sternly said, "Why are you crying? Just keep chanting Hare Krishna." As I later found out after recovering, this nurse was a Muslim, and she even refused to accept books by Srila Prabhupada from me when I was discharged from the hospital. When I asked her why, she advised me to chant Hare Krishna in an intensive care unit. She simply said, "I don't know." Somehow hearing the words Hare Krishna from her lips brought immense relief. I finally remembered what to chant at the time of death. Gathering all my strength, I attempted to chant Hare Krishna, but unfortunately all my muscles, including those of speech, were completely paralyzed. I could only murmur incomprehensibly. I couldn't properly chant Hare Krishna. This threw me into despair, and tears streamed from my eyes as I was in bed, surrounded by tubes and many other stuff. Then I heard the voice of a doctor addressing the nurse, asking who I was. She replied, "She's from ISKCON." And then miraculously the doctor sat down next to me and started singing, "He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute." And then he began chanting Hare Krishna. Thus the kirtan of devotees in Kazakhstan manifested itself for me through him in the hospital of Ranganat. Feeling immense gratitude towards this person, as well as profound remorse for my foolish life and offensive chanting, I left my body. I was fearful because I realized I had failed the test completely. I thought to myself, what a fool I have been to treat the holy name so superficially throughout my life. I scolded myself. At that moment I suddenly saw my deities, whom I had been worshipping for 23 years, Jagannath, Baladev and Subhadra. Baladev and Subhadra were in the distance, and I could only vaguely see their silhouettes. But Lord Jagannath stood very close and was vividly visible. Suddenly, I saw that all the deities of Lord Jagannath were actually one Lord manifested in multiple forms. Then I saw him in a human-like form. It was Lord Jagannath, but at the same time he was Krishna himself. He had arms and legs and beautiful figure and a straight posture. His skin was blue as the flax flower, and his face was very attractive, with huge eyes and a mysterious, soft smile. He didn't say anything, but suddenly he showed me my entire life from the moment I joined ISKCON and began practicing Krishna consciousness. My whole life passed before my eyes like a movie reel, and I saw that during this entire movie, while I played various roles, Lord Jagannath stood by my side, invisible to my material eyes. At that moment, I was in shock, realizing that Krishna never left me for a moment since I started chanting his name. He was always there, protecting me in dangerous situations when I felt alone, overwhelmed by my problems. When I began preaching to Muslims in my country, their religious leaders threatened to behead me and pursue me recklessly. Eventually they left me alone, and I thought I managed to hide from them. But it turns out that Jagannath protected me from their attacks. Several times I faced the possibility of imprisonment for preaching in scientific circles, and I was dying of fear, thinking that Krishna had abandoned me and that it was the end for me. But in the end, they left me as well. And as I learned later, all the officials involved in my case were dismissed from their positions. And this was also the protection of Lord Jagannath. One night, a maniac attacked me, but suddenly a massive woman emerged from the darkness and chased him away with loud cries. It was also Krishna's protection. Another time, when I was facing imprisonment again, I cried in fear all night. Lord Jagannath appeared in my dream and showed me that everything would be fine, and it turned out to be true. Reflecting on my entire life unfolding before me, I understood that Lord Krishna never abandons his devotees, no matter the circumstances we face due to our past sins. Even when we feel utterly alone, helpless, and defenseless, Krishna always stands by our side, protecting us in ways unseen. Moreover, Krishna revealed the most important aspect of my life while the tape of my existence was playing. He showed me that the most significant moments were the kirtans in which I participated. It was astonishing because I saw in detail every kirtan in which I chanted throughout my life, even those with only 3 to 4 devotees. He didn't show me what I considered important material events, but rather what was important to him and to me as soul, the joint chanting of the holy names. During each kirtan, streams of radiant energy in gold, blue, and pink hues rose from the chanting of devotees and reached the heavens, filling the entire universe. It was strange how even small kirtans performed by a small group of devotees possessed such incredible power. The holy name is boundlessly potent, and our attempts to chant it are so dear to Krishna. Observing my life from this alternative reality left me in complete awe and bliss. Then it all ended. I returned to my body to, like Ajamil, receive another chance, a chance to approach the holy name and the Lord differently. Perhaps by the mercy of Krishna and his devotees, all my anarthas and material consciousness will be purified by the power of the holy name of Krishna, and I will learn to chant it sincerely and purely. Now I would like to express my gratitude to my spiritual teacher and other devotees, and so on and so on. So she's very grateful. So she's just telling how it's very important to chant. And I like this story because, again, it's like proof that we don't know. And even though she thinks that she's like Ajamil and she got a second chance and so on, and she's very low and she was doing this and that, I mean, she got so much mercy that these nurses, they chanted Hare Krishna, they actually reminded her. So this is Krishna, but acting through other people, and that she had this dream, which was very, very significant and also gave her more inspiration and enthusiasm to perform devotional service even more in future. So even though she says that she couldn't remember, we can see here how Krishna was so merciful that he helped her to remember. So that's how it functions with devotees. So again, we have all these like warnings in the scriptures, but we also have a lot of mercy, and we should always try our best to chant the holy name. So Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So that's what I prepared for today. If you have comments and questions, you can say or ask. Okay. Thank you for your attention. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
They are quite good.
Yes.
No.
I think it's similar, yes, the same flame.
But it's a long.
Yeah,
It's a long wick.
Don't
You
of the base.
can just put it into the oil, and
It's more practical.
looks good.
It's easy to buy.
I just got a sample to try it out. So we try this for a few days and then we'll see. But I have many of the others. I just ordered many of these which we had before.
Yeah.
So
We need to use it first this and after.
we'll see. It's always good to have something in stock.
Yeah. Step.
Krishna 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 Krishna